The will was read in a small, stuffy lawyer's office that smelled of old paper and stale coffee. My brother Ethan sat beside me, looking bored and occasionally checking his phone. I wasn't nervous. Sad, yes, as my mother's passing a month after my father's was still a raw wound, but I was secure in what the future held. For the past 15 years, my life had been a singular promise, repeated to me countless times over family dinners and during long nights stocking shelves. The family hardware store, our parents' life's work and my own, would be mine. The lawyer cleared his throat and read the final operative clause. To my son Ethan, I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including the family business, Henderson Hardware, and all associated assets. The words hung in the air, nonsensical. I looked at the lawyer, then at Ethan, expecting a correction. But Ethan just pocketed his phone, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. It wasn't a mistake. It was the culmination of a lifetime of quiet servitude, a 15-year apprenticeship that had ended not with a promotion, but with a summary dismissal in favor of the son who had never so much as swept the floors. My life was supposed to go a different direction. I had a scholarship to study architecture at a prestigious university. My portfolio was packed, my bags were metaphorically ready, but then my father had his first stroke. It wasn't debilitating, but it was a warning. He couldn't handle the long hours at the store anymore, the lifting, the stress. My mother was already frail. Ethan, my younger brother, was in his wanderlust phase, backpacking through Southeast Asia with no plans to return. The unspoken duty fell to me. My parents sat me down and asked me, not as a command, but as a desperate plea, to defer my plans for just a year to help them keep the store afloat. That year, they promised, the store would be my reward. 1 year bled into 5. My father's health declined steadily, and my mother developed chronic arthritis that left her in constant pain. My role at the store evolved from temporary helper to full-time manager. I learned every aspect of the business, from inventory and ordering to dealing with contractors and balancing the books. The store became my life. My dreams of architecture faded, replaced by the immediate tangible reality of invoices and stock levels. The promise was always there, a constant refrain. "Don't worry," my father would say. "You're not just working for us. You're building your own future. This will all be yours." I believed him. It was the only thing that made the sacrifice bearable. Ethan returned from his travels after 3 years, broke and with no discernible skills. He moved back into his childhood bedroom. He treated the house like a hotel and the family business like an ATM, occasionally showing up to ask for a loan, which was never repaid. He never offered to help at the store. When my mother gently suggested he could at least work the register a few hours a week, he laughed. He said he wasn't cut out for that kind of work. He saw it as beneath him. My parents just sighed and accepted it. Ethan was the dreamer, the free spirit. I was the worker bee. Our roles had been cast long ago, and no one was interested in a rewrite. For 15 years, I was not just the store manager, I was their primary caregiver. I drove them to doctor's appointments. I cooked their meals when they were too tired or in too much pain. I fixed the plumbing, mowed the lawn, and handled their finances. I was their son, their employee, their nurse, and their handyman. My life was a closed loop, from my small apartment to the store, to my parents' house, and back again. I had no time for a social life, for relationships, for my own dreams. I had sacrificed my youth on the altar of their comfort and the future of the family business. A future I was repeatedly assured was mine. My father passed away last spring. In his final lucid moments, he took my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "Thank you, son. The store is in good hands. Your hands." It felt like a final confirmation, a deathbed reaffirmation of the promise. My mother, lost in her grief, became completely dependent on me. Ethan showed up for the funeral, looking appropriately somber, and then disappeared again for a week on a bereavement trip to a ski resort with his friends. I was left to grieve, run the business, and care for our shattered mother all at once. The weight of it all was immense, but I bore it because I knew I was holding my own future together. My mother lasted another 6 months without him. Her decline was rapid. Her final days were spent in a haze of medication and memories. I was with her at the end, holding her hand, just as I had with my father. Her last words to me were a whispered, "Take care of the store. It's yours now." How could I have doubted them? The promise had been their final gift to me, the ultimate acknowledgement of my years of sacrifice and devotion. It was the only thing that made their loss feel even remotely manageable. I had lost my parents, but I had secured my future. the one they had wanted for me. So when the lawyer read those words, the world tilted. It wasn't just the loss of the business, the financial asset. It was the negation of my entire adult life. My sacrifice had been meaningless. Their promises were lies. My father's dying words, my mother's last whisper. They were either the ramblings of a confused mind or the final cruel twists of a lifelong deception. I felt the air leave my lungs. I was a fool. I had been the good, dutiful daughter, waiting patiently for an inheritance that had been earmarked for the prodigal son all along. Oh wait, I'm the son, the brother. Let me fix that. The narrative voice should be male. Let me restart that last paragraph to correct the gender. I felt the air leave my lungs. I was a fool. I had been the good, dutiful son, waiting patiently for an inheritance that had been earmarked for the prodigal son all along. The lawyer droned on, detailing the transfer of assets, but I wasn't listening. I was watching my brother. Ethan's expression was no longer bored. It was one of smug satisfaction. He knew. He had known all along. This wasn't a surprise to him. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment he would be crowned king, despite never having set foot on the battlefield. After the meeting, I confronted him in the parking lot. I grabbed his arm, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt before. "How could they?" I asked. "After everything I did?" He just shook his head, a look of pity on his face. "Look," he said, "it's just how it is. Dad always said a business needs a man at the helm, someone who can make the tough decisions. It's not personal. Not personal." He had just inherited my entire life's work, and he was telling me it wasn't personal. The casual, ingrained sexism of that statement, the idea that my gender made me less capable, was the final stinging insult. The lawyer later confirmed the reasoning, albeit in more delicate terms. He showed me a separate letter of instruction my parents had left. It explained their decision. They praised my loyalty and hard work at the store, but they expressed their belief that, in the long run, a family business needs a man's name to carry it forward. They believed Ethan, simply by virtue of being male, would have more authority with suppliers and command more respect from employees. They wrote that they were leaving it to him to provide for the family, including me, in whatever way he saw fit. They had reduced my 15 years of proven competence to a matter of chromosomes. The idea that Ethan would provide for me was a sick joke. The day after the will was read, he walked into the store for the first time as the owner. He didn't look at the books. He didn't ask about inventory. He walked straight to the cash register, took out $500, and told me he was taking his girlfriend out for a celebratory dinner. He then informed me that he would be taking a weekly owner's salary from the profits, a salary for a job he had no intention of doing. My job, he explained, was to keep running the store, to keep making it profitable so he could have a steady income. I was trapped. I had no other job prospects. My entire resume for the last 15 years was Manager Henderson Hardware. I had no savings, as I had always poured any extra money back into the store, thinking I was investing in my own future. I was now an employee in the business I was supposed to own, working for a boss who knew nothing about it, my labor directly funding his life of leisure. Every nail I sold, every gallon of paint I mixed was a coin in his pocket. It was a special kind of hell, a daily reminder of my own stunning naivety. Ethan's management style was a disaster. He would show up randomly, usually to take more money from the register. He would make impulsive decisions without consulting me, ordering pallets of useless, trendy gadgets he'd seen online, which then sat in the back room gathering dust. He would undermine my authority with the 2 part-time employees we had, telling them to ignore my instructions and listen to him, their real boss. He was a child playing with a toy he didn't understand, and he was slowly, surely running it into the ground. I tried to reason with him, to show him the numbers, to explain that the store couldn't sustain his withdrawals and his terrible business decisions. He would just wave his hand and tell me to make more sales. He saw the store not as a complex ecosystem of profit and loss, but as a magic box that was supposed to produce money for him on demand. He had the entitlement of a feudal lord, believing the land should produce for him without any effort on his part. I was just a serf, expected to till the soil and hand over the harvest. My parents had not just betrayed me, they had fundamentally misunderstood the very nature of their own legacy. They thought they were passing the store on to a strong man who could lead it. Instead, they had handed it to a parasite who was slowly draining it of its lifeblood. Their antiquated sexist beliefs had not secured the future of the business. They had signed its death warrant, and I was being forced to watch it die, day by day, from the inside. The store's profits dwindled. We started to fall behind on payments to our suppliers. Our longtime vendors, men who had trusted my father for decades and who had come to trust me, started calling, their voices a mixture of confusion and concern. I had to make excuses, to lie for Ethan, to protect the reputation of a business that was no longer mine. Each lie was a small piece of my own integrity, chipped away in service of my brother's incompetence. The breaking point came when a major supplier threatened to cut us off completely. We needed to make a $10,000 payment within a week, or our shelves would be half empty. I showed the final demand notice to Ethan. He glanced at it and tossed it on the counter. "Figure it out," he said. "That's what I pay you for." I snapped. I told him there was nothing to figure out. The money was gone. He had taken it. We were on the verge of bankruptcy because of his greed and mismanagement. His reaction was not one of panic or remorse. It was one of pure, petulant rage. He accused me of being a bad manager, of sabotaging his business out of jealousy. He shouted that my father had been right, that I didn't have what it took to make the tough decisions. The irony of him, the man who had never made a single real decision in his life, lecturing me on toughness, was almost too much to bear. The argument escalated, the first real fight we had ever had. It ended with him firing me. "Get out!" he screamed, his face red and contorted. "Get out of my store." I walked out of Henderson Hardware that day with nothing but the clothes on my back and 15 years of my life down the drain. I had been fired from the job I had sacrificed everything for, by the brother I had unknowingly subsidized for years. I stood on the sidewalk across the street watching him lock the door, and I felt a strange and unsettling sense of freedom. The burden of the store, the burden of his incompetence, was no longer mine. I had been cast out, but I was also finally untethered from their toxic legacy. Finding a new job was a nightmare. "What have you been doing for the last 15 years?" potential employers would ask. When I told them I had been managing my family's hardware store, they would get a polite, dismissive look on their faces. Family business was code for no real-world experience. My years of hard work, my expertise were seen as a quirky hobby, not a legitimate career. My parents' desire to keep me in their world had, in effect, made me unemployable outside of it. I ended up taking a job at a big-box home improvement store, a vast impersonal warehouse that was the antithesis of our small community-focused shop. I was no longer a manager. I was a sales associate in the plumbing aisle, a nameless drone in an orange apron. It was a humiliating step down, a constant reminder of how far I had fallen. Every day, I would answer the same basic questions from customers. My deep knowledge of the trade reduced to pointing people toward the right kind of PVC pipe. Ethan ran the store into the ground within 6 months of my departure. Without me there to manage the day-to-day, to smooth things over with suppliers, to actually run the business, the whole thing collapsed. The shelves went bare. The customers stopped coming. One day, I walked by and saw a closed sign taped to the door. The legacy my parents had been so desperate to protect, the business they had stolen from me to give to him, was dead, and he had been the one to kill it. I expected to feel a sense of satisfaction, of schadenfreude, but I just felt a profound sadness. It was a waste of my parents' life's work, a waste of my 15 years of sacrifice, all of it squandered because of a deeply ingrained, nonsensical belief that a man, any man, was inherently more capable than a competent, experienced woman. Oh wait, my character is male. They thought my brother was more capable just because he was the man they wanted, not the one I was. Let me fix the gender perspective again. Let's rephrase. All of it squandered because of a deeply ingrained, nonsensical belief that a certain kind of man was better. They wanted Ethan, the charismatic dreamer, to be the leader, not me, the quiet worker. Their idea of a man's name to carry the business forward was about a specific type of masculinity I didn't perform. The end result was the same. Their prejudice, whatever its exact flavor, had destroyed their own legacy, and I, the one who could have saved it, was across town, stocking shelves in an orange apron. The story should have ended there, with Ethan's failure a sad but just conclusion. But there was one final, cruel twist. A few weeks after the store closed, I heard through the grapevine that Ethan was doing well. He had come into some money, people were saying. I assumed he had sold off the remaining assets, the building itself, but then a friend sent me a link to a local news article. The headline read, "Tragedy Strikes Historic Hardware Store, Suspected Arson." The article detailed a fire that had destroyed the building, and it mentioned that the new owner, Ethan Henderson, was expected to receive a substantial insurance payout. The fire, just like in the previous story, the convenient, business-ending fire. I felt a surge of cold fury. He hadn't just run the business into the ground, he had in all likelihood burned it down. He had destroyed our parents' legacy, their physical creation, for a final, desperate cash grab. The incompetence had been a cover for the long con. He hadn't killed the business by accident. He had murdered it for the insurance money. And my parents, in their misguided wisdom, had handed him both the motive and the opportunity. Now it all makes sense. Ethan lives in a nice apartment downtown. He drives a new car. He posts pictures of himself on vacation, just like the brother in the other story I heard. A different method, but the same outcome. He is living a life of leisure, funded by the final, smoldering embers of the business I spent my youth trying to save. I, on the other hand, am still in the plumbing aisle. I am still struggling to make ends meet. The gap between our lives, which had always been present, was now a vast and unbridgeable canyon. I live with a constant simmering rage. A rage at my parents for their blind, destructive favoritism. A rage at their outdated, sexist beliefs that valued my brother's gender over my proven competence. A rage at Ethan for his laziness, his entitlement, and his casual cruelty. But most of all, a rage at myself for being so foolish, for believing their promises, for sacrificing my own dreams for a future that was never mine to begin with. I was a faithful steward of a kingdom that had already been promised to a different prince. I have come to a difficult conclusion. My parents did not see me as a son. They saw me as a placeholder. I was the regent, tasked with keeping the throne warm until the true heir, their favored son, was ready to claim his birthright. My years of service were not seen as a sacrifice to be rewarded, but as a duty to be performed. They did not betray me in the end. Their entire relationship with me, from the moment they asked me to defer my dream, had been a form of prolonged, calculated exploitation. I am writing this here because I cannot say it to anyone in my life. To my friends, it is just a story of a raw deal. They cannot understand the depth of the betrayal, the years of lies that underpinned it. They cannot understand what it feels like to have your own parents look at you and see not a person, but a tool. A tool to be used for the benefit of your more valuable sibling, and then to be discarded when it is no longer needed. The hardware store is gone now. They tore down the burned-out shell and built a sterile, glass-fronted yoga studio in its place. Progress, I suppose. I walk by it sometimes on my way to work. I look at the people in their expensive workout clothes, and I wonder if they have any idea of the history of the ground they stand on. The history of a family, a business, a promise, and a devastating betrayal. A history that is now just ashes, buried under a new and shiny facade. My relationship with Ethan is, of course, non-existent. The last time I saw him, I was working the late shift, and he came into the store with his girlfriend to buy a new shower head. He didn't recognize me at first in my orange apron. When he finally did, a look of panic, then pity, crossed his face. He tried to make a joke, something about me getting back to my roots. I didn't say a word. I just scanned his item, took his money, my money in a way, and watched him walk away. He is a ghost to me now, a ghost with a great credit score. I am slowly, painstakingly rebuilding my life. I have been promoted to assistant manager of my department. It's not much, but it's a step. I am saving money, a little bit at a time. I am taking online classes, slowly working toward a degree in business management, a degree I should have had 15 years ago. It is a much harder, much slower path than the one I should have had, but it is my path, and I am walking it alone, on my own terms. The ultimate irony is that my parents' actions have forced me to become the very thing they claimed Ethan was, a man who can make the tough decisions. I have had to make the tough decision to cut them out of my life. I have had to make the tough decision to start over from nothing. I have had to make the tough decision to face the world alone. I have become the man they claimed they wanted, but I have become him in spite of them, not because of them. And I am a man they will never know. My parents taught me a valuable lesson, the most painful lesson of my life. They taught me that loyalty is not always rewarded. They taught me that hard work does not always lead to success. And they taught me that family is not always a safe harbor. Sometimes it is the storm. It is a lesson that has made me harder, more cynical, but also, in a strange way, stronger. I no longer have any illusions. I see the world for what it is, a place where you have to fight for your own future, because no one is going to hand it to you, especially not the people who promise they will. So, this is my story. The story of the good son who did everything right and lost everything. The story of the prodigal son who did everything wrong and gained it all. It is a story as old as time, I suppose, but it is my story, and I am telling it now as a way of letting it go, a way of releasing the bitterness that has been my constant companion for so long. It is time to stop being the victim of their story and to start being the hero of my own. A hero who is not defined by the kingdom he lost, but by the small, sturdy house he is building for himself, one brick at a time. I no longer dream of architecture. My dreams are smaller now, more practical. I dream of a life of quiet stability, a life with a job that pays the bills, a small apartment that is my own, and a few good friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. It is a humble dream, but it is an honest one. And after a lifetime of living for someone else's promise, the honesty of that dream feels like the purest form of freedom. To anyone out there who is sacrificing their own life for a family promise, I say this: be careful. Promises can be broken, and sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who are most capable of hurting you. Do not put your future in someone else's hands. Hold it tightly in your own. It is the only future you can truly count on. I learned that lesson the hard way. I hope you don't have to. The money from the insurance was Ethan's grand prize. For me, the true inheritance from my parents was a profound and deep-seated distrust of authority and tradition. They believed in an old world order, a patriarchal system where a name and a gender were more important than character and skill. Their adherence to that outdated belief cost them their legacy and cost me my youth. It's a steep price for a lesson in sociology, but it's one I will never forget. I am now fiercely independent, questioning every assumption, every promise. They wanted me to be a dutiful son. Instead, they made me a revolutionary of my own quiet life. I am learning to separate my father, the man I loved and respected, from my father, the man who betrayed me. I hold on to the good memories, him teaching me how to use a saw, the pride in his eyes when I fixed my first engine. These memories are precious, and I refuse to let his final, flawed decision taint them all. He was a product of his time, of his own upbringing. His failure as a father in that one crucial aspect does not negate the love he showed in others. It is a complex, messy, and painful reconciliation, this act of loving a ghost who hurt you, but it is a necessary part of my own healing. Similarly, I struggle with the memory of my mother. She was not the driving force behind the decision, but her passive complicity. Her role as the emotional enforcer of my father's will is a unique kind of betrayal. She was the one who was supposed to be the nurturer, the advocate for fairness. But when it came down to it, she chose the path of least resistance. She chose to support her husband's prejudice over her son's future. Her weakness was her weapon, and it cut just as deeply as my father's misguided strength. It's a different wound, but it bleeds all the same. Ethan is a lost cause. I have come to accept that. He is not evil, not in the way a movie villain is evil. He is just weak, entitled, and completely lacking in self-awareness. He is a black hole of need, created and enabled by our parents' lifelong indulgence. To be angry at him is like being angry at a storm for raining. It is simply in his nature to consume and destroy. My only recourse is to stay far away from his path of destruction. He is a force of nature I cannot change, only avoid. My new life is built on a simple principle: earn your own success. Every small achievement, every dollar saved, every skill learned is a victory. I am no longer part of a family team. I am my own team. And the captain of this team is learning to be a much tougher, much smarter leader. The lessons I learned running the hardware store, about inventory, about customer service, about profit margins, were not wasted. I am now applying them to the most important business of all, the business of my own life. The world of the big box store is a brutal, impersonal one, but it is also a fair one. Here, my performance is measured in numbers, in sales figures, in customer satisfaction surveys. My gender is irrelevant. My family name means nothing. I am judged solely on my own merits, and I am finding that I can compete, I can succeed. In a strange way, this sterile corporate environment has become a more meritocratic and just world than the loving family I left behind. I am slowly making friends at work, people from different backgrounds with their own stories of struggle and resilience. We are a motley crew of survivors, each of us fighting our own quiet battles. We don't talk about our pasts much. We don't need to. There is an unspoken understanding between us, a mutual respect for the scars we all carry. This is my new community, a family forged not by blood, but by the shared experience of showing up every day and doing the hard work of living. I no longer feel like a victim. The word itself feels wrong, too passive. I was a target. I was a resource. But I survived the exploitation, and in surviving, I have reclaimed my own agency. My story is not one of tragedy. It is one of emancipation. The story of a man who was freed from a life of indentured servitude, a life he didn't even realize he was living until he was cast out. The pain of that casting out was immense, but the freedom that followed is priceless. I am saving up for a truck, an old, used one, probably a bit rusty, but it will be mine. I will pay for it with my own money. Money I earned in the plumbing aisle. And when I have it, I think I will take a road trip. I will drive west, with no destination in mind. I will see the country. I will be the free spirit that my brother always pretended to be. But my freedom will be real, because it will be earned. It will not be a gift, funded by someone else's sacrifice. It will be the product of my own resilience. To the man I was 15 years ago, the bright-eyed boy with dreams of architecture, I would say this: I am sorry. I am sorry for the life you lost. I am sorry for the dreams that were deferred and then destroyed. But I would also say this: thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your loyalty. You built a foundation, even if it was for the wrong house. And now I am using the stones of that old foundation to build something new, something that will last, something that is finally, truly my own. I still have moments of profound anger, waves of it that wash over me at unexpected times. But I have learned to let them come and go. I do not fight them. I do not let them consume me. They are just the echoes of the past, the phantom pains of a wound that is slowly healing. They are a part of me, but they are not the whole of me. The whole of me is something I am still discovering, a new continent of self that I am exploring, one day at a time, and it is a journey that I am, for the first time, excited to be on. The hardware store of my memory is a place of contradictions. It was my prison and my sanctuary. It was the source of my greatest pride and my deepest sorrow. It was the symbol of a promise and the instrument of a betrayal. It is a place I can never go back to, literally or metaphorically, but it is also a place that will be a part of me forever. It is the crucible in which I was forged. I am a man made of sawdust and sacrifice, of loyalty and loss, and I am stronger for it. My parents believed they were upholding tradition, but tradition, without wisdom and compassion, is just prejudice with good posture. They were so afraid of breaking the old rules that they broke their own son instead. That is their legacy. My legacy will be different. My legacy will be to build a life where people are judged by the content of their character, not by their gender or their birth order. It is a small legacy, a quiet one, but it is an honorable one. And it is a legacy I will be proud to leave behind. I have found that the best way to fight against the darkness of the past is to create light in the present. So I try to be kind. I help my coworkers. I am patient with my customers. I am building a reputation, not as a manager or an owner, but simply as a good man, a reliable man, a man of his word. In a world of broken promises, I am trying to be a man whose promises are worth something. That is my quiet rebellion. That is my final victory.